Hi, it's Katrina. Ancient designer handbags. All over the world, statues built by ancient cultures have been spotted holding mysterious handbags. Nobody's really sure what these handbags represent, although the lack of evidence hasn't stopped conspiracy theorists from labeling them as proof of time travel, saying that ancient deities were returning from the future with designer bags. This probably isn't the case, just throwing that out there, and it's more likely that the handbags shown in the statues were just ordinary bags. But then, it is a little suspicious that the exact same bags can be seen in depictions from Mesopotamia all the way to Mexico. It's likely that both cultures used bags to carry things, but why would they have similar handbags being held by gods carved in stone? What is this mysterious purse? Writer Carrie Sullivan points out that the shape has appeared in depictions made by the Sumerians of Iraq, in the ruins of ancient Turkish temples, in decorations of the Maori of New Zealand, and in crafts made by the Olmecs of Central America. Handbags can be seen in the art of disparate cultures from around the world and throughout time, with the first known instance of a handbag appearing at the end of the Ice Age. They are probably not bags at all, but baskets. The baskets are most likely symbols, representing ancient knowledge held by only those at the highest ranks of society in ancient cultures. What were all these cultures trying to show? One theory is that it is a representation of the cosmos. The square represents the Earth, and the semicircle that makes the bag's strap is the hemisphere of the sky, and together they form one, the material and the non-material. In this depiction, it would be easier for common people to understand these abstract concepts. The oldest representation of the handbag can be found in Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest temple complexes ever discovered and possibly the beginning of religion. There are animals, gods, and 3 handbags. The Curse of Timur. Timur was a conqueror from 1336 to 1405. He was a Turco-Mongol warrior who founded the Timurid Empire, a once prosperous and bloody empire throughout Persia and Central Asia. He completed a lot and conquered more than most ancient rulers of the world. He tried to restore the Yuan dynasty in China. He controlled much of the remains of the great Genghis Khan's shattered empire, and he allegedly killed about 17 million people through conquest, or about 5% of the population. It was in 1941, over 600 years after Timur's death, that the Russians decided to open his tomb. An expedition of archaeologists set out to Samarkand to finally open the tomb of the legendary emperor, but not everyone was on board. Locals feared there was a curse attached to his tomb. The curse stated that anyone who tried to open the tomb would bring great destruction down upon their nation. Of course, archaeologists never heed warnings like this, otherwise they would probably never excavate anything. On June 20th, the tomb was opened. When they pried the lid off, a horrible stench filled the mausoleum, unlike when Egyptian mummies are unveiled, which apparently usually smell sweet. And then, 2 days after Timur's tomb was opened, on June 22, 1941, the Nazi Germans invaded the Soviet Union without ever declaring a war, and went on to kill millions of people. Some claim it happened because Timur's tomb was opened, making it one of the strangest historical coincidences involving an ancient curse. Michael Jackson in ancient Egypt. In the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago, there are many incredible Egyptian artifacts, including mummies and priceless sculptures. But in recent years, people have become obsessed with one bust in particular that dates back 3,000 years. The bust is of a woman with no name, bony cheeks, part of her nose missing, and sharp eyes. This woman looks identical to Michael Jackson. In fact, the bust of the woman looks so much like the king of pop that it has kind of become the main attraction at the museum, an icon of pop culture and past gods blended together. The resemblance is uncanny, leading some people to question whether or not Michael Jackson was actually a reincarnation of an unknown Egyptian entertainer. If you believe in reincarnation, that's certainly one way to explain the bizarre coincidence. According to the museum officials, after Jackson's death in 2009, the museum became overwhelmed with visitors trying to compare its likeness to that of the dead superstar. And yeah, there's no denying that they look really similar, right? What do you think? Rumors are going around that perhaps this was a very distant relative of Michael Jackson. Maybe he had Egyptian blood and never even knew about it. Others say perhaps MJ was a time traveler. Or maybe he wanted to make himself look like this mysterious bust and used it for his inspiration. The artifact itself was purchased from Cairo in Egypt sometime during the 19th century, then displayed at the Chicago Museum in 1988. But the exact details of the bust's origin are a mystery. It probably came from sometime between 1550 and 1050 BC, suggesting the Michael Jackson doppelganger could have been alive under the rule of the boy king Tutankhamun or King Ramses II. Romulus and Moses. The story of Romulus and Remus, the alleged founders of Rome, shares some odd similarities with both the stories of Moses and the story of Osiris, the Egyptian god. The overarching theme surrounding all four of these ancient people is that they began their lives sent floating down a river as babies. All were sent away in the hopes of escaping one persecution or another, usually at the hands of a threatening male. To be quite honest, all these stories are almost exactly the same, from the foundations of ancient Rome to the religion of ancient Egypt and to the Bible. In the case of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers were sent down the Tiber River in a basket by their mother, Princess Rhea, who wanted to keep them safe from the evil king Romulus. They were ultimately discovered by a female wolf, who then raised them as her own. In the case of Osiris, he is tricked into entering a floating vessel by his brother Seth, who then locks him inside and sends him floating down the River Nile. He is eventually found by the Queen of Egypt and saved. Then there is Moses, who was also sent down the River Nile in a basket by his mother to protect him from the pharaoh who's trying to kill all the male babies. This time it was the pharaoh's daughter who discovered Moses and raised him as her own. Nobody knows why all these stories are so similar, though chances are they each gained inspiration from the other over thousands of years. The Central Pyramid. Most of us are familiar with the iconic Great Pyramid of Giza, an amazing technological wonder with mysteries surrounding how it was built so long ago. But what almost no one knows is that the pyramid is also a geological wonder. It just so happens to be sitting in a rather geologically significant location, the exact center of the Earth. How this happened is beyond anyone's current understanding, but according to the experts, the Great Pyramid is one of the most accurately aligned buildings ever made by human hands. First of all, the pyramid faces due north with 3/60th of a degree of error. However, this small margin of error is likely because by the time scientists were able to study it, the position had shifted over thousands of years. The really amazing thing is that the pyramid is positioned exactly at the intersection of the longest line of both latitude and longitude, placing it at the bullseye or dead center of the middle of the planet. How did the Egyptians do it? For them to have done this on purpose would be practically impossible. The ancient builders not only would have needed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, they also would have had to be experts in geometry. And to take it a significant step further, they would have needed to know the exact dimensions of the Earth. Considering many people thought the Earth was flat back then, this is highly unlikely, making this world wonder's location yet another amazing historical coincidence. What do you think? Were the ancient Egyptians that advanced? Let me know in the comments below. Stonehenge's cousin. Across the water from Britain, there is a structure 4,000 years old that seems to be directly related to Stonehenge. It's a ringed sanctuary that was discovered in a small German village, something the experts are referring to as the cousin of Stonehenge. According to Archaeology magazine, the ancient structure can be found near Pomelta, sitting in the middle of a potato field. It's been undergoing excavations for the past 15 years. Archaeologists believe this structure was built either by the same people's descendants who built Stonehenge or by European visitors who witnessed the monument and went back home to build their own. After all, there are only about 300 years separating the two megaliths. The same rituals were likely going on at both sites, though researchers still have no idea what those rituals entailed. The purpose of both Stonehenge and its cousin in Germany remains a mystery. Keep in mind that both these structures were built at the beginning of the Bronze Age, a transitional period for humans in which we learned how to work metal, develop complex social structures, and to build wheels. But for some bizarre reason that scientists can't put a finger on, early humans were obsessed with building giant circles out of standing stones. And while most scientists agree it probably had something to do with the observable movements of the sun, there is no real way to know the truth. Peruvian Hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics have been found in the highlands of Peru, leading some to speculate that ancient South American cultures may have somehow had communication with ancient Egyptian people, since the hieroglyphics are kind of similar. The hieroglyphics were found carved in stones that had likely been used as building blocks for ancient structures. These blocks were found near the small town of Wado, and they were recently inspected by a professional anthropologist from the local museum. They were interpreted as being symbols of the origins of life and are believed to be crafted by an unknown culture who lived in the same region hundreds of years ago. Based on the enormous geoglyphs found in Peru, it is not hard to believe that ancient people in the area would have made smaller hieroglyphics as well, just like the ancient Egyptians. Unfortunately, there are not as many examples of the hieroglyphics in Peru. Many of these civilizations disappeared thousands or hundreds of years ago, and then when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they destroyed pretty much everything else. There is no evidence left really as to whether ancient cultures were in contact with each other or not. Ancient calendars. There are two ancient calendar systems that share so many similarities it seems almost impossible that they developed independently of one another. At least that's what researcher David H. Kelly says, the guy who published a paper on the subject back in 2016. David is a Harvard-educated archaeologist from the University of Calgary, meaning he really knows his stuff. But his paper was still controversial. He claims the two calendars indicate direct contact between the civilizations in Eurasia and those in Mesoamerica. This is about 1,000 years ago, and obviously it would turn everything we've been taught by mainstream archaeologists on its head. David believes it may have been the pre-Columbian societies that actually made it to Asia, since they did have quite a lust for exploring. It could be that they traveled all the way to Asia, where they stole the idea for the calendar from the Chinese, and then went back home and made their own. The similarities between the two calendars are many. For instance, the days are associated with elements like water and fire, along with animals. They even correspond frequently between the two systems. Days associated with the deer, dog, and monkey are exactly the same in the Mayan and Chinese calendars. Even more shocking is that the same day associated with the jaguar in the Mayan calendar is associated with the tiger in the Chinese calendar. And the same goes for the Maya representing one day with the crocodile and the Chinese representing the same day with the dragon. Coincidence? What do you think? Thracian Dolmens. Stonehenge in England gets all the attention, but the truth is that there are plenty of standing stones and monoliths all over the world, and they are all shockingly similar. Some even believe it's more than just a coincidence that rock dolmens and stone circles were erected by ancient people who lived thousands of miles away from each other and never met. Dolmens are burial mounds made of standing stones, and in fact dolmens from the extinct kingdom of Thrace have a lot in common with Stonehenge. There are at least 160 dolmens in the old territory of Thrace, in what is today modern Turkey. According to Dr. Engin Beksaç, there are Thracian dolmens that date back 3,500 years. They act as large graveyard monuments or ancient tombstones, but they also have a close connection to early religious practices, the cosmos and the solstices, just like Stonehenge. The connection is still unknown. Why did ancient people from England all the way to modern-day Turkey and even in Korea build similar stone structures with similar functions? Archaeologists don't know the exact reason, making the erection of these stone monuments one of the biggest ancient mysteries. The beginning and the end of the Civil War. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee and Colonel Charles Marshall met at the house of Wilmer McLean. They were Confederate officers. It wasn't long after they showed up at the house that General Ulysses S. Grant arrived with his party of Union officers, including Captain Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son. And there, in the parlor of Wilmer McLean's house, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia surrendered and the Civil War was over. Wilmer himself had been too old to fight when the war began. For its majority, he had been a simple merchant buying and selling sugar. The 4 years before the defeat of the Confederacy, the First Battle of Manassas, also known as Bull Run, had actually been fought in Wilmer's very own backyard. It was the first battle of the Civil War. And so, by some strange twist of fate, or perhaps coincidence, the Civil War actually started in Wilmer McLean's backyard in the year 1861 and came to an abrupt end inside his parlor 4 years later in 1865. Thanks for watching! Do you think the ancient cultures of the world are connected? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!